Hey everyone, it's RobbRyder. I had been doing some reading the last week and a half, and it comes down to this. And this organizational chart, I think, helps to clarify. So this is the Michigan legislature, right? It's in its own box. And outside of the box are two other boxes, one for Senate members and one for representatives. Well, then the Senate and the House of Representatives aren't the legislature. In fact, the boxes aren't the same color. Right? The background's different color. So who's the Michigan legislature? Well, that would be the people, because the sovereignty resides in the people. And as it turns out, we have the highest court, right? The Supreme Court of Michigan, or whatever the hell they call that thing, is not the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of Michigan is you taking your complaint to your representatives of the legislature. Well, that's how it appears, and so we're going to try that next. But, this all comes from reading mainly just Blackstone. And he says it, right? The highest court's the legislative court, is the parliament. And anyways, the legislative lawmaking power of the state of Michigan is vested in a bicameral two-chamber body comprised of the Senate and House of Representatives. The Senate's made up of 38 members elected by qualified electors of each senatorial district. Senators are elected at the same time as the governor and serve 4-year terms. Geez, they're just like the governor. And the House of Representatives consists of 110 members elected by qualified electors of representative districts. Okay. So nevertheless, they just represent the legislature. They're not the legislature except in a representing capacity. You're the legislature. And English law agrees. So we're going to be taking it to the House. And I am RobbRyder. My email address is courtofrecord@AOL.com. It's Wednesday, February 25th, 2015, and just a little bit out of Blackstone's Commentaries. And then the one thing that we may want to be trying to use this for soon would be because it's the legislature that can impeach. And that's the proper thing to do with an officer who's supposed to be performing a function in the executive branch and is guilty of a crime. We go and we have him impeached. So that could be an attorney. An attorney is a civil officer. A judge, civil officer. You have him impeached. More on that later. Let's get there first. Okay, so Book 1, Chapter 2 of Blackstone's Commentaries, right? The second chapter of the first book. The power and jurisdiction of Parliament, says Sir Edward Coke, is so transcendent and absolute that it cannot be confined either by causes or persons with any bounds. Now, what I'm reading isn't section after section in the book. It's just sections I picked out to put on here. But you could go to Book 1, Chapter 2 of Blackstone's Commentaries, read the whole thing yourself. And of this high court, he adds, it may be truly said, if you consider its antiquity, it's the most ancient. If its dignity, it's the most honorable. If its jurisdiction, the most extensive. Again, he's talking about, what they call a parliament now, what's called the Grand Assize in the past, or the Grand Council, or whatever it was. It has sovereign and uncontrollable authority in making, confirming, enlarging, restraining, abrogating, repealing, reviving, expounding the laws concerning matters of all possible denominations, ecclesiastical, temporal, civil, military, maritime, or criminal, being the place where that absolute despotic power, which must in all governments reside somewhere, is entrusted by the Constitution of these kingdoms. The despotic power went to the Parliament, or the legislature, because that's another name for it, which is us, because the sovereignty resides in the people. And we have a court that can handle every possible thing, but we keep going to an administrative hearing of some kind. All mischiefs and grievances, operations and remedies that transcend the ordinary course of laws are within the reach of this extraordinary tribunal. It doesn't matter what it is. Overruled, denied, whatever. This is the Supreme Court. Lowercase Supreme Court. Elsewhere, and in this every executive power, and every executive power is again checked and kept within due bounds by the two houses through the privileges they have of inquiring into, impeaching, and punishing the conduct, not of the king, of course, destroy his constitutional independence, but of his evil and pernicious counselors. Inquire, impeach, punish, conduct unbecoming officers of the king. Hence it indisputably appears that parliaments or general councils are coeval with the kingdom itself, and that means having the same age, date, and dignity, or date of origin. So it's as old as the kingdom. What is? The parliament, the legislature, the will of the people. In a free state, every man who is supposed a free agent ought to be in some measure his own governor, and therefore a branch at least of the legislative power should reside in the whole body of the people. There it is. There's the whole body of the people, Michigan legislature. We have a branch of the legislative power. All of it. So, the Speaker of the House of Lords, which would be like our Senate, is the Chancellor, or keeper of the King's Great Seal, or any other appointment to the King's Commission, or by the King's Commission, and if none be so appointed, the House of Lords, it is said, may elect, whose office it is to preside there, manage the formalities of the business. And that's what happens now. In a parliamentary system, the group of people is elected by the people, but then the group of people elect their hierarchy within that group of people. So in the House of Lords, who's ever, that would be the Senate, it's the majority leader. That's the way we do it now. It used to be this way. Well, now they said they can elect one, and it's the majority leader is going to be the Lord Chancellor, the highest office in the Lords, which are really the judges, as we'll see. But continuing on, the privileges of Parliament are likewise very large and indefinite, which was occasioned an observation that the principal privilege of Parliament consisted in this, that its privileges were not necessarily known to any but the Parliament itself. Well, yeah, if you can overturn everything, well, yeah, I don't agree with that law. That law doesn't apply to me. Those kind of things, right? You can go, so now you can go get your own private acts, and this is really what we're talking about is, you take your grievance to either to the Senate or to the House, and I would say, well, take it to the Senate, except they haven't allowed us yet to register in the proper election precinct, and so I'm not sure that we can do that, but maybe we can. I'm going to say we can. Anyways, some things you would take directly to the House, some things you would take directly to the Senate, it appears. And since it's the House of Representatives that can impeach, if you needed to impeach somebody, I guess you would take it to the House of Representatives. You take them your complaint, they act as your attorney. They act as the grand jury. But at the top, right, is the Lord Chancellor, and when you get his seal on something, boom, now that's like getting the seal of the sovereign, because he's the keeper of the sovereign seal. And that's what we need to get. So this isn't just about doing a impeachment. I have this situation where, I have a certificate of live birth, certified copy record of birth, and to me that's my owner's certificate of title. It's got a big seal on it, and it says, it certifies, that there's a record remaining in the office, and they won't give me the record. So I'm going to go and have these guys get my record for me. In other words, you're going to go claim your property, your estate, by going to your representative. Now, I don't know that they know this stuff yet, but it's just, if it's the highest court, well, that's where you're going to go to. the places we've been going to, like, I live in something that's called Kent County, which should really be the county of Kent, right? But it's called Kent County, and it's got a Kent County clerk. And it's got a Kent County treasurer, and it's got a Kent County assessor, and so forth. Well, Kent County isn't the government. It's a corporation. And so they put us into a corporate town that we really don't want to be part of, and they haven't let our records ever leave the county. I don't believe they've ever been properly recorded in the state, and that's why people jump up and down when they go get their paperwork authenticated, like their baptism or their birth certificate and so forth, which, hey, I'm all for that. That's good. But now what do you do with it? It needs to get to the state. The state needs to know we're live. Send it to your representative and tell them you'd like to make sure that the record reflects that, that your birth certificate's been authenticated and you're claiming your birthright. Yada, yada, yada. All things we talked about before. It's just we're going to go to a different door now. Okay, so the privilege, so we talked about that. So we got lots of privileges, right? You can take any grievance to them. And we'll just see what they say, but, you can take it to them. And you can point out that this civil officer isn't executing the will of the people. That would be like in an act. So in Illinois, they have an active attorney, and it says what an attorney can and cannot do. And if they're not following that, then they're not following the will of the people. Have his ass impeached. He's a civil officer. In Michigan, the penal code is an act of the people, and it has all the different crimes that are in there. Just pick some out, or just say that they're in violation of the penal code, whatever the act is. Right? We're not supposed to be writing these guys legal briefs when you contact your representative. It's just you with a grievance. We'll see how it goes. Okay, and therefore, when in 31 Henry IV, it'd be old stuff, right? Henry IV. Is that 4th or 5th? Could be the 5th. I can never remember. The House of Lords propounded a question to the judges touching on the privileges of Parliament, and the Chief Justice, in the name of his brethren, declared they ought not to make answer to that question, for it has been used aforetime that the justices should in any wise determine the privileges of the High Court of Parliament, for it is so high and mighty in his nature that it may make law, and that which is law it may make no law. And the determination and knowledge of that privilege belongs to the Lords of Parliament and not to the justices. Amen. So we should all be Lords of Parliament. So we are all Lords, and we pick some of them to represent us. In so large a state as ours, it is therefore every wisely contrived that the people should do that by their representatives which is impractical to perform in person. Representatives chosen by a number of minute and separate districts wherein all voters are or easily may be distinguished. The counties are therefore represented by knights. Knights are lords, right? So the counties are represented by the lords, elected by the proprietors of the lands. The cities and boroughs are represented by citizens and burgesses, chosen by the mercantile part of or supposed trading interest of the nation. So, again, this is lowercase counties, cities, boroughs. So they don't have to be what we think they are. They don't have to be Kent County, County of Kent. No, a county is just a defined territorial land. And so wherever your senator is, whatever that territory is, that's the county. He's the knight. The cities and boroughs are, all the it's a group of election precincts make up a city or a borough. So, because if you have a city limits, you got so many election precincts in it. Well, it's the same in the county. I live in a thing called Oakfield Township. Should be the township of Oakfield, but they call it Oakfield Township. And in Oakfield Township, there are 3 election precincts. Oakfield Township is a 6x6 square. Each of these is, 2x6, about 12 square miles. And but it's based on population, I'm sure, or we would have more. So, anyways, and then so when I was reading about Michigan's legislature, it said always include your last name and address on the letter or email. A letter cannot be answered if there is no return address, and this shows you are a constituent. The return address. What's a constituent? He who gives authority to another to act for him. The term is used as a correlative to attorney to denote one who constitutes another, his agent, or invest the other with the authority to act for him. So you need to give him an order. That's all we're going to be doing is giving him an order, telling him what I'm to do. Bringing a complaint saying that the will of the people isn't being has been violated. So one of the big things will be impeachment, right? Right off the bat, if you got a court case, you want to have the civil officers impeached. And since this is the Supreme Court, lowercase Supreme Court, and it's the lowercase Supreme Court that you want to have review your court case from a lower court, because this is the Superior Court, you could just ask, this is where you ask for the writ of review and take judicial notice, and these are all things I think. I can't prove any of it, but it's the reason I'm going the way I am, and we're going to go find out. But if it's a lowercase Supreme Court, it's the place that would review a case from a lower court. So you want to ask your representative to have your court case reviewed because you don't believe the plaintiff has legal standing or capacity to bring a charge. And then they take it to their standing committees that have experts in it that will determine yay or nay if they need to do that. If they already know, well, they don't need to do all that. Anyways, impeachment in the United States is an express power of the who? The legislature, the people at the top in the little gray box. That would be us. That allows for formal charges against a civil officer of government for crimes committed in office. Well, jeepers, yeah, we may know a few of those. The actual trial on those charges and subsequent removal of an official on conviction of those charges is a separate act of impeachment itself, is separate from the act. Right? So the trial and everything else, so the impeachment is, well, there it is analogous to an indictment. In regular court proceedings, while trial by the House, by the other House, the Senate, is analogous to the trial before a judge and jury in regular courts. And so the Senate sits as a court, and the senators become judges. Typically, the lower house of the legislature will impeach the official, and the upper house will conduct the trial. So the lower house is acting as the prosecutor, and the upper house is acting as the judge and jury. And I think this applies to that everybody, all these characters that are using a middle initial in place of their middle name are all federal officers. That's a jurisdiction of some kind, and they've all been appointed to office, and I can't get all the reasons I think that. It's just, things I think about. And all I know is that, we all have this middle initial avatar. And he's in a particular jurisdiction. And so if that's the jurisdiction they're in, then it will be a federal impeachment process, but it can still start in your state legislature, as we'll see. Impeachment is analogous to indictment in regular court proceedings, while trial by the other house is analogous to the trial before judge and jury in regular courts. At federal level, Article 2 of the United States Constitution, Section 4, states that the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. The House of Representatives has the sole power of impeaching, while the United States Senate has the sole power to try all impeachments. The removal of impeached officials is automatic upon conviction in the Senate. The Supreme Court determined that the federal judiciary cannot review such proceedings, and that is because this is the highest court in the land, the legislative court. Impeachment can also occur at the state level. State legislatures can impeach state officials, including governors, according to their respective constitutions. Hey, here in Michigan, impeachments. Act 62 of 1872. It's been around for a while. Impeachment of all civil officers, power of the House, suspension vacancies. That the House of Representatives shall have sole power of impeaching civil officers for corrupt conduct in office or for crimes and misdemeanors, but a majority of the House members elected shall be necessary to direct an impeachment. Back to that in a minute. Right, so it's at state level, and you could have a state act that says you can impeach. At the Philadelphia Convention, Benjamin Franklin noted, historically, that removal of obnoxious chief executives had been accomplished by assassination. Franklin suggested a proceduralized mechanism for removal, impeachment, would be preferred. Yeah, he was always one for the understatement. So federal impeachment, we use it as our example. You got a federal court case? Well, here you go. Let's see if this works. Impeachment proceedings may be commenced by a member of the House of Representatives on their own initiative, either by presenting a listing of the charges under oath or by asking for referral to an appropriate committee. The impeachment process may be triggered by non-members. Well, who's a non-member of the House of Representatives? You and me. We could send them a complaint under oath. That's all we're talking about. Who do you lay your complaint before? Put it under oath. Put your verification statement on there. For example, when the Judicial Conference of the United States suggests a federal judge be impeached, a charge of what actions constitute grounds for impeachment may come from a special prosecutor, the President, state or territorial legislature, grand jury, or by petition. A petition is just another name for a bill of complaint. This is all things that happen. Petitions are things that happen in courts of chancery. The type of impeachment resolution determines to which committee it will be referred. A resolution impeaching a particular individual is typically referred to the House Committee on the Judiciary. A resolution to authorize an investigation regarding impeachable conduct is referred to the House Committee on Rules and referred to the Judiciary Committee. So, in law, a resolution is a written motion adopted by a deliberative body. The substance of the resolution can be anything that can normally be proposed as a motion. So all you need to do is motion for an investigation for impeachable offenses and get everybody to agree, or the majority. Take the motion and get it adopted by a deliberative body. Now, when you look deep, well, at least for myself, I never realized this stuff before, but when I'm reading about these offices in the Senate and so forth, you have these people that are parliamentarians. Well, that would mean we're using parliamentary law. When you read about parliamentary law, we all may know something about Robert's rules, but in Robert's rules, if you want to bring a motion to the floor, it needs to be seconded, because Robert's rules applies to private organizations. But they have Jefferson's rules, or they have what was one they use in my state? The federal government uses Jefferson's rules, and my state uses Mason's rules. And it points out in something I was reading that because these are public bodies, when they bring a motion, it doesn't need to be seconded by anybody, because they're just bringing your grievance to the floor to have to have it, put in the book, basically, and get somebody to work on it. So, for long and important motions, though, it is often better to have them written out, discussed, easier, so blah, 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 right? So in law, a resolution is written motion adopted by a deliberative body. So we're going to send something to somebody, and they're going to motion it on the floor. It doesn't need to be seconded. It just needs to be voted on. Asking for, right? Basically, they're going to take your complaint and ask for a investigation into this complaint. I agree. If there's a complaint, have it investigated. Yeah. An alternate term for resolution is a resolve. House Committee on Judiciary, by majority vote, will determine whether the grounds for impeachment exist. Right? So once it's been decided that it needs to be investigated, well, the House Committee of the Judiciary, by majority vote, will determine whether the grounds for impeachment exist. If it finds they exist, they will set forth specific allegations of misconduct in one or more articles of impeachment. Oh, they're going to write the frickin' charge. Okay. The impeachment resolution or articles of impeachment are then reported to the full House with the committee's recommendation. We recommend we prosecute. The House debates the resolution and may, at the conclusion, consider the resolution as a whole or vote on each article impeachment individually. A simple majority of those present and voting, right? So it doesn't need to be all of them, just those present and voting, is required for each article of the resolution as a whole to pass. If the House votes to impeach, managers, typically referred to as House managers or lead House managers, are elected to present the case to the Senate. Recently, managers have been selected by resolution, while historically the House would occasionally elect managers or pass resolution allowing appointment. Speaker of the House is supposed to do that. These managers are roughly the equivalent of prosecution district attorneys in standard criminal trial. Okay. The U.S. House Committee of Judiciary is also called the House Judiciary Committee. It is a standing committee in the United States House of Representatives. It is in charge of overseeing the administration of justice within the lowercase federal courts, administrative agencies, and federal law enforcement entities. I believe we'd want to have them involved and say, hey, take a look at my court case, will you? I don't believe United States of America is the government. I believe that it's the United States of America. I don't believe that this civil officer is using the name that's on his oath of office. Right? That's basically what they're not doing. I mean, on their oath of office or on their authorization to hold the office or whatever it is, they're using their full name. They're using their proper person. Let's put it that way, because a full name could just be your first name. It doesn't have to be your middle. But they are using your proper person. However, that isn't what they're using when they sign paperwork. The Judiciary Committee is also a committee responsible for impeachments of federal officials. Okay. It's called the Lawyer of the House of Representatives. So, 1813, it's been around a while. Established by the House of Representatives, judicial proceedings. Since that time, scope of the committee's concerns expanded to include not only civil and criminal proceedings. Well, let's just see what they do. Here's all the things they have jurisdiction over. Committee jurisdiction. The judiciary and judicial proceedings, civil and criminal. Right? You don't believe somebody's filed a proceedings? I guess you take it to these guys. Administrative practice and procedures. You don't think they're following those? Well, you take it to them. Bankruptcy, civil liberties, constitutional amendments, criminal law enforcement, federal courts, judges, local courts in territories and possessions. Immigration policy. Oh, there you go. That's how you become a citizen. Interstate compacts, claims against the United States. Well, you can read the rest yourself. Just stop and read it if you want to. Right? So you would send it to your representative, who would motion to the floor to have because of what you're complaining about, to have the committee take a look at it, to investigate. All in favor? You look out there, there's only 3 or 4 of them. Yeah, aye. They're at least the ones voting. Some won't vote. So they got to have some mechanism to make this stuff work, right? And the first mechanism is you need to complain about it. Okay, so that's how it works on the federal level. Now, we'll just quickly kind of skim this one in Michigan. So again, it's called the impeachments. It's the Act 62 of 1872. Michigan impeachments. Ohio impeachments. Texas impeachments. Right? Find the law. Someplace you're going to find it. See if it's tied to an act. Use the act number. If not, just use whatever it's called. Just so that you know that it exists is the main thing at this point, right? Every officer impeached may by the governor be suspended in exercise of his office until his acquittal, and the governor may make provisional appointment to a vacancy occasioned by suspension of an officer until she shall be acquitted. Every impeachment shall be tried by the Senate. When the governor or lieutenant governor is tried, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court shall preside. When an impeachment is directed, the Senate shall take an oath or affirmation truly and impartially to try and determine the same according to the evidence. So here where it says the Chief Justice, we always call them guys a black-robed priest. And the House of Lords were made up of 2 groups, the Lords Temporal, the knights, and the Lords Spiritual, the bishops. And they didn't necessarily always sit together. Right? So one of them didn't have to show up if the other ones voted on it. Even if if all the let's say everybody showed up, if the Lords Temporal outnumbered the Lords Spiritual, which they always did, and they all voted in one direction, it didn't matter what the Lords Spiritual said or thought, the thing was going to pass. And so I'm thinking that in this, our perverted system of, what they've done to the system, that the black-robed priest sit as the Lord Spiritual. And they're not all bishops. They may all be priests, but they're not all bishops, and so just the bishops are the lords. And those could be like the guys on, well, you would think the guys on what we know of as the Supreme Court. Could be the appeals court too. I don't know who it is. I just think they make up one of the bodies that makes up the legislature. And, regardless, somebody there is acting as the judge. So when an impeachment is directed, the House of Representatives shall elect from their own body 3 members whose duty it shall be to prosecute each impeachment. All right, so how do you get it directed? That's what we're going to find out. And the House of Representatives are hereby authorized and empowered to the said managers to prepare and present articles of impeachment in accordance with resolutions of the House. So, send your court case, especially if you're at the state level, and if it's a traffic ticket, send it to your representative and tell them whatever's wrong with it, that's wrong with it. And things I pointed out where they're not using the form that's been prescribed by the Supreme Court. We have uniform traffic citations. And they're supposed to be done in a certain way. If they're not being done that way, well, they didn't follow the will of the people. And that's reason enough to send it to your representative to say, I want to have this reviewed. I don't believe that they're following procedures. I don't see a sworn complaint. Right? They didn't sign the paperwork. It's not in the name of the government. When an impeachment is directed, the House of Representatives shall elect from their body 3 members. Okay, so they're going to elect the members. Whenever an impeachment is directed, the Senate shall forthwith, after the hour of final adjournment of the legislature, be organized into a court for a trial of the same at the state capitol. Boom. As soon as the paperwork comes out, we're going to shut her down, final adjournment of the day, and going to become a court. I bet you it doesn't take him too long. The Senate sitting upon trial for impeachment shall have the same power to compel the attendance of its members as when engaged in the ordinary business of legislation. Appearance, impeachment, trial time, place of adjournment. When issue shall be joined in an impeachment, the Senate, sitting as a court for the trial of the same, shall appoint at the time and place of trial thereof, time and place so appointed. The Senate, as a court, shall proceed to hear, try, and determine the impeachment, and may from time to time, if necessary, adjourn. Okay, so the House is going to bring a complaint, properly done, bill of complaint, to the Senate to show them they have probable cause, because they're supposed to be acting as the judge, apparently. Or it's just going to go to who's ever at the top to say, yeah, you do have it. Now we're going to schedule a trial. So it's going to go to the, going to go to the presiding judge, who's going to issue a notice to appear to whomever the civil officer is for them to come before the Senate and have a trial. That makes sense to me. The written process of the Senate sitting as a court for the trial of an impeachment shall be signed by the Secretary of the Senate and tested in the name of the presiding officer. So they got writs and processes, and it sits as a court, and I don't know what else you need to see to say, hey, I want to try this. The presiding officer and members of the Senate, while sitting as a court of impeachment, and the managers elected by it shall receive a sum of $5 each day. Right? They're getting paid big money on that day to do this. Okay, so hang on just a second here. Okay, it's amazing how many of these little PDFs you can find that have to do on a subject that you're interested in once you have an idea what the subject is that you're interested in. So in this particular one, it's called For the People, Helpful Hints for Contacting Your State Legislature. An estimated 90% of the public will never express even a single opinion with their legislature. I never have. It is surprising that more people do not contact public officials since government decides so much of what affects our lives. The government defends our civil rights, regulates commerce, protects consumers from unfair trade practices, establishes policies to maintain public's continued good health. The government builds and repairs public roads, provides education, the list goes on. Sometimes there's even a reluctance to contact lawmakers because there's a belief that no one listens or cares. Let's put this myth to rest right now. Perhaps this idea developed because our legislatures are always busy. It's true they are frequently on the go, but never so much that they aren't glad to hear from individuals in the district. Legislatures are very interested in what the public has to say. Most see dialogue with the public as one of their primary objectives in office, or while in office. And from one that was called a student guide, it said these are the qualifications. In order to become a state legislature, a person must first of all be qualified, required by the state constitution as follows: be a citizen of the United States, at least 21 years of age, and elector of the district they represent. Okay, well, how did they get those credentials, right? I want to see what their paperwork looks like, and maybe that's how I want to do mine. Not have been convicted of subversion within the past 20 years, or within the past 20 years been convicted of a felony. Not simultaneously holding any office, employment, or position under the United States, the state of Michigan, or political subdivision thereof. So if they were an attorney and they took this office, they're no longer an attorney. I guess that's what I wanted to point out. A person may, however, be a notary public or member of the armed forces reserve. The constitutional provisions allows people holding offices or positions to run for legislature, but since a dual office holding is prohibited, a legislative elect must resign the prior office or public employment as a condition to taking a seat in the legislature. All right. So it just sounds to me like, well, if they were an attorney prior, they've had to resign, but they can be a notary. And here in, I think it was in Illinois, we were looking at the notary law quite heavily. That there, when you fill out the paperwork, they really want you. In fact, I think they mandated you had to put your name, your first name, middle initial, last name to become a notary. And that's what a lot of attorneys are using it as first name, middle initial, last name. And they are attorneys as part of being their job. But they're representing themselves to be attorneys, not notaries. Excuse me. They are notaries as part of being an attorney. You are a notary. At least that's how it appears. Nevertheless, they use the middle initial. And that's mandated for notaries. And it might do good to ask if you're, well, that'd just be, I'd say it would be good to ask whoever holds the oath of the notaries if your attorney has an oath there as a notary. But I don't want to mess all that stuff anymore. I'm merely pointing out that in these videos, in this video at least, that we should be sending things, our grievances, to the House of Representatives, or maybe directly to the Senate, because not everything has to be a bill. When you read these things, we talked about doing bills of impeachment and so forth. Well, not everything has to be a bill. A lot of things, for instance, the law has already been written, right? And we just need to have it executed. So if we're showing to a judge, the judges are in the Senate, that an act of the people is not being followed, well, then we didn't have to have an attorney. We can do that ourselves, right? We can just tell them, as the attorney or as the executive, hey, this law isn't being followed, prosecute it. Otherwise, if you're not sure, you take it to the House that has all these committees, and they'll look at the problem and they'll decide. And that's, as simple as a judicial review. I'd like to have a judicial review on this court case because I don't believe they're following procedures. And they say, well, what do you mean by that? I say, well, why don't you just take a look at it? Tell me what you think. All right, the legislative process in Michigan, a student's guide. Find something for a student. Make it kid simple. For the people, by the people. How state and local governments operate. And, the problem we have at the local level is nobody's taken a proper oath. All the offices have been vacated. And they may have made appointments somehow, but, right, they're not the elected people. Or if they are, they're using a different name as an elected person. So, anyways, hope I didn't confuse anybody too much. I'm trying to wrap all my head around this myself, but because of what I've seen, it's already enough to say, well, hell, I'm going to go send something to them and see what they do with it. Okay? I am going to take it to the House because Lord Blackstone said, and of this high court, if you consider its antiquity the most ancient, dignity the most honorable, jurisdiction the most extensive, it has sovereign and uncontrollable authority in making, confirming, enlarging, restraining, abrogating, repealing, reviving, expounding of laws concerning matters of all possible denominations, ecclesiastical, temporal, civil, military, maritime, criminal. The being, the place where the absolute despotic power, which must in all governments reside somewhere, is entrusted by the Constitution of these kingdoms. All mischiefs and grievances, operations and remedies that transcend the ordinary course of laws are within reach of this extraordinary tribunal. That's how I'm going to try it. Y'all have a great day. See ya.